Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Greetings, gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. As always, my name is Scott McKay. I am your host at Scott McKay on just about every platform out there, including YouTube, gentlemen. If you have not checked out the newly revamped YouTube channel, please do so. I'm putting new videos out there every Tuesday, and what we're focusing on, if you haven't heard, if you've been hiding under a rock, is 2-minute videos that reframe every time, every video. I'm going to reframe an important question about dating, success with women in a way that you've never heard before. In other words, I'm finally going to give you an answer that works, and it's going to be so simple and so concise that I'm going to be able to do it in under 2 minutes each video. So check that out at YouTube at Scott McKay. And if you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, I have lots of free goodies there for you. You need to check it out. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, it is the Mountaintop Summit as always. Gentlemen, I have a special guest for you today. His name is John Lovell. And he is building quite a following out there of men who want to really get back in touch with their true roots of masculinity and make the world a better place as men. He talks about ancient wisdom in his new book, which is called The Warrior Poet Way, A Guide to Living Free and Dying Well. And that really caught my attention because lots of guests have come on this show before over the tenure of this show, which, man, goes back 16, 17 years now, and have kind of touched upon that. But I think this guy drops the hammer on it in a way that is really going to have an impact. So without anything further, from Georgia, John Lovell, the warrior poet himself. Welcome, man.
Scott, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here, man.
Yeah, you know, this is about as targeted a group of guys for you that I can possibly imagine. They all want to be better men. They want to be better in their relationships with women. And you talk about ancient wisdom. And, man, I know this is one of your soapboxes. The whole idea of being a masculine man, especially in the traditional way, we're talking being a heterosexual man who loves women, wants to be a protector, be a provider, wants to have, well, I guess, personal power, personal accountability. That is weirdly under attack somehow in Western society. Talk about that a little bit. How do you think we got here? What do you think the impact really is on guys, John?
I think the modern man actually walks around as a living avatar of what men are supposed to be. I think all that is bold and dangerous and heroic has been systematically and slowly over the decades been eradicated from what a man should be. And what you see is little caricatures of feet, men that walk through our sitcoms and movies and television shows, and they're always so nice and they're funny and they're sweet and they're sensitive. And I'm not against those things. I mean, I am those things to my wife, and to my kids, and when the situation calls for it, obviously. But that's not the best of masculinity. And sure, we're nice, but for instance, many people will put niceness as one of the top virtues, far over something like bold truth-saying or courage. And I miss the old virtues. They are greater virtues by far. But nowadays, you're not regarded as a good man when you are bold and dangerous. It's something unsafe to many people. And that was the ancient paths where men were required to be that way. If you weren't that way, you were something less than a man. And so to see masculinity turned over on its head, I don't think men like what they become. And I know women don't like what men have become either. They are thirsty for leaders and they're thirsty for strength. And so, yeah, I think the world needs masculine men again. And I'm all about that kind of life. And that's my journey. I'm on that.
Well, I tell you what, everybody listening is on that journey too. And I think you just got all of our attention because you're saying all the right things for this group. Man, there is so much there to talk about. First of all, you used the word nice, and you used it probably half a dozen times when you were talking just now. And man, boy, does that make men bristle, because they hear Mr. Nice Guy when you say the word nice. And then you use the word dangerous, which I know is a word you love to use relative to men and what we should be. And indeed, John, the idea of being nice as opposed to dangerous is not very primal. It's extremely modern. And guys will try to be nice in a very manipulative way, but really what they're doing is being scared. What they're doing is they're saying, oh, well, if I don't walk on eggshells, if I make too many demands, if I'm disagreeable in any way, people won't like me anymore. And women in particular won't want to be around because I'm not meeting their needs. I'm not kowtowing to their whims. And then the opposite happens, and guys lose respect from literally everybody who is respectable. Women aren't impressed at all, as if impressing women was the goal anyway, right? But they're certainly not attracted either. And the next thing you know, men are going around saying to themselves, what did I do wrong? I did everything I was told to do by society, and yet this still isn't working. And the irony to me, John, is you talk about how we as men are hungry for this. I mean, indeed, it is primal. It's archetypal within us to be this guy. And yet we walk around really soft avatars of our true selves, as you would say, a mere shadow. The irony to me, John, and you're a military guy, and we could talk about that, is guys will get on their video games and act out vicariously the role they really deep down primally would love to play. Then they flip the off switch on the video game finally, right? And go back out into the real world faking it again. What the heck's wrong with society, John? How did we get here?
Well, I think men do need a mission. They need purpose. They need meaning. They need to accomplish something. Everyone wants to make their life count for something. But now we have such easy buttons so that we can falsify some of those emotional wins. There's something like video games, since you brought up. In there, it's quite nice, I suppose, to fall into a different universe and save all planets from intergalactic destruction while you save the princess and get a skeleton sword, all while eating Cheetos over your beer gut, doing nothing. And then when you're done, you're like, I have accomplished something. I'm like, you didn't accomplish jack. And so oftentimes I think it can be an ambition robber. We're supposed to go out and do something real, And so I'm not against video games per se. Of like me and my boys, we have one of those old school Wiis, and on days that it's raining and I'm around, they give me that look like, Daddy, can we play James Bond GoldenEye? I'm like, boys, you're not ready for this hurt I'm about to drop on you. And we go down and we laugh and we have a good time just assassinating each other, one little game at a time. And then we shut it off and then we go do something real. So now I'm not being a snob or a Luddite of like, hey, don't use these tools. I'm saying, no, let's use the tools. Let's not them use us. Let's not them rob motivation to go out, kill and eat, guys. Let's do something valuable. I think folks guys that don't have a real identity, they don't have a lot of security. They care more than anything about what everyone else says about them and what everyone else thinks about them. And so, hey, I want everyone to think really well of me. I'll be a sweetie pie. I will be nice to everyone. Everyone loves nice, right? But what they're missing is the fact that here, this springs to mind. It's out of the book of Matthew of like, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so they did to the false prophets. You can think of just all kinds of bold leaders of, Churchill or whoever that make quotes along the lines of do something that upsets people. It shows that you're actually standing for something, of like, people really like me a lot or they really hate me. And there's not a lot in between. And I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. I mean, I want to be kind-hearted when I should be. And so I'm not a a brash bully or rude or just being a prick or anything like that. But I am going to stand for truth. And if that hurts your feelings, I highly encourage you to get stronger feelings so that you don't have to bubble wrap yourself in a world of ideas that you don't like. If you're offended easily, get stronger.
You know, if you have a thin skin and you want a thick skin, well, here's the cure. And John, you and I both know this. Get an army of anonymous internet users in your audience, and they will tell you exactly what they think of you. No holds barred. And you'll realize very quickly that that's actually a gift, because when you start hearing patterns from people who actually care about your message that you should change something, that's when you pay attention to it. But these people who troll you and they disagree with you and they hope you die in a car fire, all those people they can go pound sand. And it really does help your development as a person. I'll never forget, I had 2 consecutive emails in my inbox, John, and I bet you can relate to this, from 2 completely separate people, and actually from the antipodes of the earth. They were from completely separate continents. One of whom basically said, I saved their life and I was the most amazing person with the most amazing message ever. The other one said I was going to burn in hell and basically I was responsible for the AIDS epidemic. You know, back to back.
I knew it was you, Scott. I knew it all along.
Yeah, right.
It was your fault.
Yeah, all of it is my fault, right?
Yeah.
And all of it isn't my fault. I remember I had a mentor and he said, you realize, you know, both of those people who wrote you are exactly right and they're both dead wrong. Both of them. So guess what? Pay attention to neither. Let neither one of them drive your purpose today. You keep your purpose what your purpose is because you've thought it out and you believe in it. And that brings us to the point that you brought up, which is men being purpose-driven and having ambition. You know, that's a paraphrase of what you said, but that's what you were getting at. When we don't have that, we're blown and tossed by whatever people influence us to be in the moment. I call that having no character.
Yeah, that's
John,
great.
You can have good character, you can have bad character, but there's a third category, which is no character. You believe whatever the echo chamber tells you to believe right now, and that's subject to whim, subject to change. And when we don't have a firmly grounded belief system, we as men suffer, don't we, John?
I think so. Yeah. So I was just thinking as we were conversing just now that you have these ambitionless guys around, just kind of shadows of who they know they should be. And then on the other pendulum of the spectrum, you have the hyper ambition drive guys. I got a lot of buddies in that category and in my space that are, you know, former SEALs or, you know, fellow Army Rangers, Special Forces guys, well, whatever. But they're high on that drive and ambition scale. And I just want to take a step away from both camps in one way, in that, you know, the high drive camp of like that runs deep. That is a temptation for me. I would naturally gravitate toward that. However, that is not me. I'm not the wake up at 4 a.m. every morning to go do my second workout and then, you know, just I'm not that, in that waking up really early robs time with my wife at night, which is sacred to me. And I want a really healthy, fun, passionate marriage. And I want to be a good dad. I don't want to kill it at work. And then I want to rest and have some fun. And then I'm out on my farm doing stuff. And I want to do well in all the stuff that I'm building out at my homestead. And so more than ambition, I want balance. I'm a balanced man. And really, even the Warrior Poet Society, you know, my organization, it is supposed to find a balance. We're supposed to be fully lovers and fully fighters, not one or the other. To be one or the other is to be deficient in both category of lover and fighter. We want to be lions and lambs. You don't want to just be a lion in this life. It doesn't work. Your life is going to be a disaster. And you don't want to just be a lamb either. These sweetie pies without any teeth. Nope. World is dangerous. And if you want to accomplish something of value, you need teeth, brother. You need muscle. You need grit. You need boldness. You need to be a lion and a lamb. You need to be a warrior and a poet. I'll settle for nothing less than a well-balanced life.
Yeah, indeed. What you're talking about gets right to the irony of your branding, which is being a warrior poet. I love this idea of balance. And before we get to that, man, morning people are such fascists, aren't they?
They really are. They will always tell you what time they woke up. Always.
You know, you may know this already. Origin in Maine sponsors this show, which is famously Jocko Willink's company, who is a Navy SEAL. And we love Jocko, of course. And yet every morning he posts a picture of his Timex Ironman watch, which is like 4:28, 4:31. I'm a slacker this morning, get some. And it is amazing how men will go, yeah, I need to start getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And all I can think of to myself is they're following the lead of somebody else. They want to be like Jocko is what they want to be like. They have no personal reason for getting up at 4:30 in the morning. And it's funny because I've commented on this show exactly in the same vein you just did, which is if I woke up at 4:30 in the morning in this homeschooled family, there would be 6 hours that are lost with me twiddling my thumbs, wondering what to do, sitting in the dark, contemplating things and maybe working on the next project. But I don't spend that time with my family. I'm going to miss my beloved Spurs playing basketball at 7:30. I can't live on 4 hours of sleep like some of these other people can. I believe that sleep is nourishing and healthy. So again, as long as I know who I am, why I am the way I am, I believe I'm virtuous in the way I'm proceeding with life and I can defend it, then that's what I should stick to. Not because someone else does something differently. I should just start being that way. Yet I think a lot of guys really are followers. And in many ways, they don't even know what they're following, do they?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think what you and I are driving at of like, hey, you're the leader of your own life and your own calling. What we're not saying is don't ever follow anyone else of like, hey, I'll follow Jocko's lead on some stuff. He's got some good wisdom and he's definitely, figured some stuff out. So let me lean into this podcast he's on or whatever. And maybe I'll pick up something. Not everything's going to apply to me. I'm not doing the 4:30 thing. I feel no shame or regret. I'm like, oh, I should do that. No, zero. I don't care. Good job. All right. You woke up early and you hustled and that works well for you and your family and your rhythms. Party on, man. I don't care. Good for
Exactly.
you. It doesn't work for me. So I give a rip. But I want to hear out his arguments. I want to listen and say, all right, what does apply to me? What's going to help me on my journey to where I'm going and where I want to end up. And so I'll treat all other people and leaders as a buffet. They offer me arguments and good advice, and I'll grab what I think is good and helpful, try some other stuff out that may not pan out, and then ignore stuff altogether. Because I'm not trying to be Jocko. I'm trying to be John Lovell, and so there you go. I didn't know Origin was a sponsor. I've been out to their facility and walked around, met Pete, and hung out there. And so, pretty cool. Out in Maine, right?
Yeah. Pete's a good guy. He's been on this show, I believe, twice now. And, man, those guys are just so manly. And yet they're so virtuous. They do everything right, American made. They just want to treat their customers and their employees correctly. They just gave everybody in their shop a raise because their company's doing well. So, they're not pocketing all the money and and trying to be billionaires over there. They're trying to do the right thing. And they're good people all around.
Yeah, well, I liked hanging out with them. I went out and met Pete. We broke bread or broke lobster tails because we had this huge Maine. They're all lobster obsessed. And so I have this big party and Pete's there and I'm there and this cooler that is loaded to the brim with beautiful lobster. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, holy smokes. That's how you do lobster. And we had a great night. It was cool.
Yeah, better lobsters in Maine than Texas.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, the lobsters we have in Texas come from Maine.
Yeah.
You get them. Yeah.
I'm sorry. My wife has a hard, fast rule of don't trust seafood that's landlocked. You don't go to Nebraska and get shrimp. It's like, there's no shrimp in Nebraska.
Yeah. You got to watch out for the Rocky Mountain oysters in particular.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's right.
Anyway, man, we digress a little bit. Man, I'm champing at the bit like a racehorse to talk about men being dangerous because, well, let's go in two different directions. Like Yogi Berra once said, when you see a fork in the road, take it, right? This is going to be totally your choice where you want to go with this. On one hand, I think the whole idea of being Mr. Nice Guy has been enculturated into us as men for several decades now, maybe a couple generations. Because, see, if you can keep men from feeling as if they're the providers, they're the protectors, then there's going to be a void in the family unit. And as a quick aside, and we talked about this on the show recently, John, so just as a memo to you, you don't have to go down this rabbit hole in particular, but certainly there's pressure on the nuclear family in America.
Absolutely.
And people wonder why. And it's targeting men. There's no real war on femininity unless you want to talk about, men being women, et cetera, which we're not going to go into on this show because you can get that information everywhere. But men in particular have been told to soften up, act more feminine, be nicer for gosh sake, stop being so violent. Matter of fact, if you have a gun or two, we would like to buy them back from you so you don't have those anymore because, my goodness, they're so dangerous. And men have a blind spot to this. Matter of fact, everybody in Western culture, because we don't have to live dangerously like we had to in the past, or even certain tribes like, say, the Maasai do every day, even now, what happens is we totally miss out. We're blind to the fact that we have been weakened. And when we're not dangerous, when we're not a physical threat to those who would come, rape and pillage our village, what happens is there's a void of leadership. There's a void of provision. There's a void of protection. And what happens there is someone's got to step in and fill that void, and that becomes the government. And that's when you lose your freedom. So that's the first thing. The second is this whole idea of men avoiding being dangerous. And what we like to talk about around here is the idea of the dark side. And just to seed to this conversation a little bit, and, at the risk of making you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose, John, I do think both of these go hand in hand. So basically, I'm hitting this down the fairway for you.
Right,
okay.
Sure.
Yeah. The thing is, men think of the dark side as evil. And they're like, oh, no, I don't want to be evil. We watch too many Star Wars movies. You could argue there's never enough Star Wars movies. But the dark side is simply being willing to do that which is unpleasant, but which is the right thing you got to do. Like, for example, when an invader breaches your home and threatens your family, what are you going to do? Say, oh, sure, let me hand you everything on a silver platter, kill us all, make sure that you erase my legacy from the face of the earth. Now, we shouldn't do that as men. So talk to us about your rendition of the good kind of dangerous and the right way for men to stop being so darn nice. And by the way, you can talk about that from a psychological perspective or in terms of physical steps that you can actually go do. I don't care.
Okay,
Riff, for as long as you take.
No sweat. And one more time, I'm not against niceness. It's just when niceness is, held as a top virtue, especially at the expense of truth telling.
Well, nice is one of those words that just has too broad a meaning.
A nice person may flatter you. Now, they're a bold-faced liar with no backbone because they didn't have the stones to just say the truth, say what they really think. Nope, they're nice. They're flattering. And so, some folks that aren't defining it the same way I am may have a problem with it, and it's actually just a semantical difference. But I digress. Let's jump into dangerous. So, at first you can go, oh, dangerous. And people think about, being able to box or jiu-jitsu or fight with blades or knives and stuff. And I'm like, yeah. All that stuff is dangerous, and that's good. And I do mean that'd be a good way for you and I to grow as men is, well, let's get some skills so that we would be able to be defenders. Men are supposed to be protectors and providers, and I would like to be able to protect my family. That's why a dude is given strength. It's not to hoard it for himself. It's to be a barrier to a dangerous world around those he loves. And so real love protects. And if you really love your family and recognize that violence could come to your door one day, the loving man makes steps to become dangerous, right? And so they can be good and virtuous. They have the option of danger. And that doesn't mean I'm a danger to my family. I say it like this. I think ISIS or Al-Qaeda should fear me, but my children should not fear me. They both know I'm dangerous. But my kids don't fear that, I'm good and I'm accessible. I'm emotionally available, and we're tickle fights and wrestling matches, and we're reading books every night together out loud. And I have all kinds of stuff. My son just walked in to get me to tune up some airsoft gun, my 9-year-old, because he plans on shooting me later. And that's funny and good for him. I'm training him how to be dangerous. But these boys are good too. And so there is the physical element. I think when guys start unlocking some of that physicality, all right, you're learning some martial arts, you jumped in some jiu-jitsu, you're working out, you're losing the gut, good for you. I don't really give a rip where you guys listening in, I don't care where you're at now. Just do a little something to make yourself a little bit more fit, a little bit more hard to kill, a little bit better at protecting, and just take baby steps. It's going to add up to a lot over time. And what that unlocks, hopefully, is a certain amount of self-confidence that's going to bleed into the areas that are even more important. Because whereas I do want to be a good protector, the fact of the matter is our threats today are a little bit different. I'm not in some Scandinavian, backwater village where Vikings may pour over the horizon any moment, and I'm going to have to fight with, a battle axe or something. No, our threats are different. And right now we're in this intense battle of ideas. If all battles of arms, flesh and blood, wars, every generation thinks, okay, we have advanced to the point that violence is no longer really needed. And then that generation has a world war. And then the next generation, another world war. And if hey, guess what? I've already had wars in my lifetime. I went to war 5 times with hundreds of combat missions in those. I've done that. No, and guess what? War is here to stay. All of human history is marked by wars. And so it's a good idea to get physically strong and a good protector. But more important than that, upstream of the physical context of war and violence is always a battle of ideas. Every time there's a battle of flesh and blood, it is preceded by a battle of ideas. If the bad ideas win, you have to go to physical war and people die. If you're able to defeat bad ideas and good ideas reign, you don't go to war. And so let's win in the battlefield of ideas. And right now we're in a massive culture war, and the stakes are really high. And I see a country that I really love falling into something that's unrecognizably different. It's literally antithetical to our founding, to our framework. And a house divided against itself cannot stand. It just can't. And I don't know how any of that plays out, but I do know that I want to be dangerous physically to protect my family locally. I also would like government to fear its people, not its people to fear its government. That was the founders' intent. And that's why the First Amendment was all about the freedom of speech and religion and press and all the good stuff there. And then the Second Amendment is the only way you can keep it. And that's the people have the right to keep and bear arms. And the government is not allowed to make a single law that disarms its people. And so that's the idea. It's to protect us from a government gone rogue and tyrannical. And so, hey, if you don't trust your government and you think it's corrupt, it's just going to get worse. Make sure you never, ever, ever give up your guns. But even more than all this, physical arms and dangerous, I want folks, listen carefully, guys, tuning in. I want folks to be dangerous in the battlefield of ideas. I want us to be well-read. I want us to be well-armed with good arguments for truth so that we can destroy every lie and lofty opinion and argument which sets itself up against good wisdom and the knowledge of God, right? And so I think we must be dangerous in the war of ideas. It is more important than the battle of arms because it can prevent the battle of arms to some extent. You can't. Yeah, so anyway.
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about there. We live in a different world than the primal caveman world. It's as simple as that. Therefore, we have to adapt or die. We do definitely live in a world of ideas nowadays. It is an intellectual war on a daily basis. A lot of that is certainly because we live in a digital world. I mean, social media, wow. It just inundates us with headlines. It used to be that people were ignorant because we'd have to go to the library to find out anything that we didn't learn in school. relatively speaking, we were ignorant, right? Then the internet came along, and for years there, we enjoyed this wealth of knowledge courtesy of this information superhighway. Now, the internet and digital life pervades every corner of our being to such an extent that we are just absolutely overwhelmed. So the powers that be in the media world, and indeed the pen is mightier than the sword nowadays, right?
Right.
What happens is they can write a headline any way they want, and people will read it and go, oh, so that's the news for the day. And it's completely misleading, and it doesn't tell the whole story. And most days you can go on foxnews.com and CNN.com and see two completely different worlds spinning in the opposite direction. I mean, my yardstick for what's really news is what's printed on both pages, right?
Right.
But meanwhile, men are being told to, quote, do hard things by the masculinity movement, which is still doing Tough Mudders and jujitsu. And yet some of the hardest work we do need to do as men is intellectual.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to what we talked about. If you don't know who you are, you don't know your identity, you don't know what your worldview is and what you stand for, well, then you most certainly can't stand up for it when it's challenged. So basically, not having a core belief system is a lot like being a 98-pound weakling in the physical space. Right. It's applied to your intellectual space, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, you mentioned being a man who has gone to war, been in combat situations, and certainly that shapes a man, John. And it's a huge part of the reason why you gain so much respect from so many men out there. What would you tell men who haven't been in the military? What they can do, I don't know if I want to use the term play catch up with what guys like you have experienced and the life lessons you've learned in that context, but how can men who aren't military vets learn how to do hard things? How can they toughen up? How can they become not only physically tougher, but mentally tougher? Obviously, we can work out, do jujitsu and all those things that the masculinity movement talks about. But what are the subtleties there?
Yeah, if you're looking for a battle to fight, you don't have to go across the pond to fight terrorists. We have got so many fights going on right now in the culture war, and I'm just desperate for men to stand up with some stones and just say plain truth. You know, I am floored by the apathy and cowardice of, men to left and right.
Well, it's celebrated.
Hey, you want a battle to fight? We're killing over 1 million babies a year in the United States right now. It's a genocide against the unborn. Absolutely unconscionable, horrific, evil, twisted, terrible. I think history, 100 years from now, will look back on our massacre against the most innocent babies and compare us to Mao Zedong and Stalin, Mussolini, Pol Pot and his killing fields. And we look back at them now that we have the benefit of some chronological space. And sneer of like, oh, we'd never be something like that, as we suck our babies out of women's wombs part by part. It's disgusting. It's so vile and hated, twisted, murderous. And so, yay, there's fights everywhere. Get in the battlefield of ideas for that. Start protesting. Start writing Congress people. Run for office if you want. Just speak. Hey, you can start by speaking out. I stand with the unborn. And so there's just one example of a terrible fight that's right in front of us. Fight for that. Fight for women. They're being literally erased right now. And there's all these crazy movements right now just having lies said. And many of us don't want to bring heat upon ourselves or censorship, which I live with constantly. We don't want to lose friends or be excoriated by an old high school classmate with all caps on Facebook or make a family reunion awkward or anything like that. And so we just mute ourselves. We self-censor. And I'm like, hey, if you want to do something noteworthy, stand for truth and speak it out loud when no one else will. And I'll follow you. I'll follow you because I miss bold truth. And the world can't survive without it.
I love bold truth. It feels good. It's like when you haven't done charity work in a while and you go volunteer at the Special Olympics, you end that day feeling better about yourself. You've done more for yourself at your soul level, at the primal level, than what you've even done for someone else that day. I feel the same way when I speak my truth and I'm bold about it. When I know I have done it in a way that's true to myself. I almost look forward to putting my fire suit on and hearing these people snivel out their protests to the truth. Let them. And you get on Twitter and you see people actually with a point, and it's a good point. It's a solid point. It's a virtuous point. And there is a litany of people who just call them names. It's all ad hominem arguments because they have no counterpoint other than you're an idiot, you're stupid, because they have only believed what they've been told to believe.
Right.
But if you get in the wrong echo chamber, you better indeed have that fire suit on because you're going to think it's you against the world, but it's all an illusion. It's just the 100 people in that echo chamber against a majority of people who actually think the opposite and think the virtuous, well, dare I say, the right and correct way that is in line with human prosperity and development going forward. And here's the weird part, John. Those people have such a loud microphone. And if they get enough media behind them, it's easy for us to really get scared silent because we think we're wrong and they're right. And to me, that kind of harks back to the whole idea of Mr. Nice Guy having been baked into our culture. If you have a preposterous idea, it takes about 2 or 3 decades for it to become mainstream because you can't just push it out there and say, hey, why don't you all believe this? Because everybody will laugh at it. First of all, you got to get all the naive, nice people to agree with you because they'll just do what they're told. When you get enough of them, you get some momentum. You can scare everybody else into staying silent when the emperor has no clothes. And then when you get enough of them, the few people left who are willing to stand up, you can cancel them. And when those people are finally scared into silence, you have 5% left and you could just dismiss all those people as tinfoil hat wearing extremists. It's scary. Yet I believe there are so many issues out there, and we don't have to enumerate them, where 80% of the people know that issue is twisted and wrong in the way you were just describing, but they refuse to stand up for it, either because they're too scared or more likely it just doesn't affect their life personally.
Yeah.
And that is where the information battle is nowadays. I think it's right on the money. And it goes right back to the central point here, which is ancient wisdom. I mean, the ancients didn't have Twitter. They didn't have broadband. Give us a couple more examples about how we as men can and should tap into ancient wisdom for the betterment of everybody.
Yeah. There's an old grit and toughness, a long suffering, and a boldness about men. That was just part of surviving. And now I think about how easy and comfortable we can make life. You know, I took a hot shower this morning, and it was great. I didn't get in until the temperature was perfect. And when I got out, my house was tuned to the exact temperature I wanted. And then I went to my refrigerator, which keeps my food cold, and it's just stocked full with food. And I had some orange juice and some eggs. And everything was just so. And it was easy to cook. I didn't have to light a fire or anything like that. Then you get in a car and perfect, temperature control as well. And it zaps me 60 miles away while I'm listening to my entertainment, sipping my hot coffee of and maybe if I go to the doctor and something's in pain, I'm like, give me some local anesthetic or put me to sleep for this. And if we can avoid all pain, and even our most impoverished folks can live like the kings of old. And so I'm not against, any of that stuff. I just admitted that I used all of it, and so I'm not against it. I'm just saying, hey, what's the cost of that? Because what idiot runs toward pain? Who chooses to just be miserable? If I can have comfort and ease at every moment, why not choose that option? And what we can't see is what it's doing to us as men. Men are supposed to be tough. And the only way we can possibly become tough and dangerous is to walk through the fire. It's to be uncomfortable. It's to be miserable. It's to face fear and say, hey, that looks scary. I'm going to do it anyway. And if we're not challenging ourselves like that, we're not going to grow. We're not going to be tough. We're going to be weak. And the world needs us to be strong. And so because we can artificially make ourselves so comfortable and have such ease, we have to artificially, forcefully avoid that so that we can make ourselves strong, because the soul of a man still has battles to fight. And we need to be equipped to do them. But the modern world, if you let it and you just fell into those well-traveled roads and ruts that everyone else is running, you're going to be a declawed house cat. Good for nothing, easy to control, served up its food, living a worthless, impactless life. And so, gentlemen, do hard things because everything depends on it.
You know, in the grand scheme of human history, immediate gratification and the easy button really are unusual, if not abnormal, for sure. You know, it's a postmodern convention is what it is. And it's easy to see that as normal nowadays because it's so prevalent, but it really isn't primal at all. You talk about the declawed house cat. We were talking about lions earlier. A declawed house cat is like the feline opposite of a lion. I've noticed that when people don't have passports and don't travel here in the United States, and I don't say this to be elitist or, again, I'm not showing off. You mentioned that earlier in your own right. It just simply is a fact. Having traveled to so many developing countries and so many other parts of the world that are inherently more dangerous than any state in the United States, at least in the contiguous United States. You go to Alaska and those guys have sidearms because a grizzly can come around the corner at any time. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. And you go to a place like East Africa and you camp on the Serengeti. And the guy comes and says to you, all right, you might want to go to the latrine before you settle in for the night because the black mambas can slither faster than you can run.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, but that's not really what you have to worry about. It's the Cape buffalo. So if you see eyes reflecting outside, just go back in your tent because they're probably sizing you up. This isn't something we have to deal with on a daily basis. But the crazy part is you come back from a trip like that so energized and feeling so alive because that adventure, that dangerous element, especially to men, I think, makes us really feel alive.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're all kind of anesthetized as men, and then we get used to it and we don't even recognize anything's wrong. It's just crazy. 2 last questions for you. You wanted to talk about women. You wanted to talk about success with women, and that's what we're all about around here. You have a wonderful relationship with your beautiful wife, of course, as do I. I have a wonderful relationship with my beautiful wife, by the way, not yours. What are a few quick bullet points you would give guys on how to succeed with the right woman in their life?
Most relationship problems aren't actually relationship problems at all. They're personal problems. You're selfish. She's selfish. You both want to be right. You're prideful. And so really you got to become a better human so that you're capable of a good marriage. And that sucks. That's no fun to be more selfless. I don't want to be selfless. I want to make a point. I want to be right. I want to have my needs met. I want to be served and not served. That's the easy default button of humanity. So it's actually great work to have to actually grow as a person. And that's really what helped my wife and I in our marriage. We both had to become better people. We had to become more like Jesus. And once we became more like Jesus, marriage became a lot easier. Not that it's easy now, but we had a really tough first couple years. And now we're in year 17 and it is cooking, man. We're doing great. We're having a fun time. You mentioned travel. We're going to Egypt in 6 days and we're bringing our boys. And so big trip coming up and we do stuff. We ride horses and, I just watched my boys. I'm at my home office today and I saw them run down and grab eggs from the chicken coop and they're taking care of them. And we're just doing all kinds of stuff and doing it as a family. This morning, I sat with my wife over a cup of coffee. The boys were out doing chores, and we read some Song of Solomon from the Bible this morning and prayed for each other. And that was awesome. That was awesome. Last night, we were slow dancing in the kitchen together, and my boys came in. And they make these awful faces and start growling like, ugh, they don't like to see daddy and mommy, slow dancing or anything. And I'm like, hey, boys, I know you don't like it, but you have to learn to dance. It's part of being a man. You learn how to fight and you learn how to dance. It's both of them. And they're still young guys right now, so it's done with a wink and a smile. They're 9 and 10, but by the time they're 14, they're 15, they may actually be all about it. Either way, it's just part of being a man. And so, anyway, I want to be romantic with her. I want to meet her emotionally and physically, and I want to be a good man for her. I want to be easier to love. And she wants to be easier to love as well. And that doesn't come by default because really, I think folks don't do marriage right. They are really chasing that in love feeling and that passion feeling. And really that is there in the beginning, hopefully, but then it starts to pretty quickly wane. And if it's not replaced or at least buttressed by a very deep friendship. Friendship is actually more important. And passion can go on that. And then you go through different seasons. I'm like, all right, she just had a baby. All right, you're not going to get laid for like 8 weeks, man. Just, it's a different season now. It's okay. It's okay. But I'm just saying passion can kind of come and go and ebb and flow, but the deep friendship stays. And it's what actually makes a long, deep waters marriage.
Yeah, you want to be dangerous. Try being selfish during her pregnancy and postpartum.
Bro,
that's going to be dangerous for you as a man.
Yeah, sure thing.
I have this huge smile on my face. I just think you're so right on the money. I think that's just a wonderful narrative that you just wove. I think it's fantastic, and I'm so glad you did.
Thank you. If I could say one more thing is, dudes, date your wives. Even if you don't feel like it, every week go out on a date, and you're like, oh, it's expensive. Hey, try divorce. Divorce is far more expensive. Far more expensive.
Preach it, brother.
Like, well, she doesn't want to, or I don't want to, or we don't, blah, blah, blah. Excuses, you chump. Make it happen, even if you don't want to. Make it happen. You need to invest in this. You made a promise. Now honor the promise. And 12 date nights in, you might actually start having some fun. In 16, then you might say, like, holy cow. Our marriage is really good. If you don't work on it, your marriage is doomed. And it'll be your fault because you're the leader. And so no excuses. Date your wife, even if you don't want to. Try to have some fun, and that'll be good. You need to laugh and have some fun. And I know you don't feel like it. Right. And maybe some passion has died or whatever. There's one way to get it back. It's working on it. So date your wife. Do it.
Not to kill the levity, but my last question surrounds your talking point of dying well, which is a topic we've done an entire show on. And yet it is an important point to consider. A lot of guys, we cited this poem relatively recently on the show. A lot of men, they go out with a whimper, not a bang, to quote T.S. Eliot. What does dying well even mean? And what do you have to say on that, John?
Really too much to cover here, but I'll just throw out some general pieces of this. I do a real deep dive with some practical stuff.
Well, just the elevator pitch is fine, although we don't want to die in an elevator. That wouldn't be dying.
Yeah, that's right. So here's some highlights. The elevator. No unfinished business. No unfinished business. You don't want to sound like, oh man, I crushed it at career, but I've been estranged from half my family. And, nobody's even come to your bedside. As you're sick and holed up, and you're just filled with all kinds of regret. I had a buddy who has had a falling out with his dad, and his dad sucks, man. He does. And so it'd be easy for this guy to just he's a friend, to just not link up with his dad, who reached out and wants to meet up. And this guy, my friend, is like, man, what's the point? Well, what's the point? This guy's awful. And if I told you more about the details, you'd be like, yeah, let that relationship go. Don't proceed. Now, my friend here, he's a grown man with a family, so he's resilient. He's really moved on. He's grown. He's middle-aged now. So anyway, and I said, man, I think that you should go ahead and just go hang out with your dad for a couple hours. And he was quiet, and he's like, why? And I'm like, think of it as a favor you do to yourself. And he pushed back a little bit, and I'm like, I really don't get anything from that relationship. I don't desire anything from that relationship. That's not doing me any favor. So I'm like, no. It's not a favor you're doing for yourself today. It's a favor you're doing yourself 10 years from now because your dad is dying and let's leave no unfinished business. And he immediately, that hit him and he's like, oh, yep, okay. That's it. He wants no unfinished business. And so he's being kind to himself in 10 years to remove that future regret. And I'm like, rock on, buddy. You are killing it. So no unfinished business. That's good. Another thing is make sure you're living a life that actually makes some kind of impact. A guy gets to the end of his life and he wants to know that it all was for something. And as nice as it is to be comfortable and entertained, it's hollow and you'll know it as you go on. That's why a lot of guys have this horrible midlife crisis and they go nuts. And it's because of they haven't made anything count. They've just been logging hours through entertainment and busy work. And they're like, hey, I wanted something more. And so they go out and do something crazy. And it's because their day-to-day has been meaningless. Make an impact. Stand for something, even if it costs you something. That's the stuff that will matter most, is the stuff that was hard-earned and costly. And so there's a couple things. I could go on, but.
Yeah, man, obviously you're passionate about that one, as am I. I'm reminded of how billionaires make their kids get jobs and go to school and make something of themselves. I've talked to trust fund babies who are mollycoddled through early adulthood, wake up at age 30 going, I really want to do something. I want to do something meaningful after all. And they come to that conclusion on their own. So what you're talking about is absolutely dead on accurate. Well, just a fantastic conversation, Mr. John Lovell. He is the warrior poet, and his new book is called The Warrior Poet Way, A Guide to Living Free and Dying Well. So indeed, it's in the subtitle of the book itself about dying well. You can find it on Amazon by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. And if you're listening to this show very shortly after it's released, it's at the very top of my Amazon influencer queue there for you. You can also go to mountaintoppodcast.com/warrior. I'm not going to make you spell Lovell. And you will be magically teleported to John Lovell's website, warriorpoetsociety.com, where there's lots of great information there for you. Also look up John Lovell on YouTube, where he's got 1.3 million followers and change, and the videos are just excellent. John, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been just a fantastic conversation.
I appreciate it, Scott.
Yeah, man. And gentlemen, we've already talked about Origin in Maine. Great jeans, great boots, the best supplements you will ever take, all natural, will make you feel like $1 million. You will look and feel like a man after you visited Origin in Maine. When you do and you partake of whatever they're proffering there nowadays, it changes daily. They come out with new and exciting things just constantly over there. Use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an additional 10% off. The guys over at HeroSoap.com will also make you feel like a man. Use Mountain 10 when you partake of their bath gel or their soap products to make you feel clean, smell good, and feel good. Also, the gentlemen over at Keyport.com have a brand new line of face plates so you can dress up your everyday carry device any way you want. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is not your grandpa's Swiss Army knife. The new school everyday carry devices are just fantastic. You can do so many things with them. I carry mine constantly. I would not leave home without it. Use Mountain 10 at Keyport also to get an additional 10% off. Links to Origin, Hero Soap, and Keyport can all be found at mountaintoppodcast.com. Gentlemen, more of you are joining the master classes that I do at the end of every month. I am covering a central topic to success with women and being a better man every month. You can grab your ticket to the latest one and or check in with previous ones when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/masterclass. And gentlemen, if you still haven't gotten on the phone to talk to me for 25 minutes for free, let's check in with where you are right now, where your success level is with women, and if you're living your best life as a man, which we've been talking all about this show. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com. If you're on your desktop, use the red button in the upper right-hand corner to get to my schedule, and let's talk, gentlemen. All of that and more is there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.